Good morning, everyone, and welcome to today's candidate forum with candidates running for the State Assembly's 97th District. Joining us this morning are candidates Mr. Joe Banske, Kathleen Cummings, Aaron Perry, and I think Mr. Travato just joined us. We're happy to have everybody. Thank you so much for taking your time and being a part of our forum this morning. As Diana had mentioned, I am Joe Mushka. I am the Executive Director of the Addiction Resource Council here in Waukesha, and also Waukesha County's Drug-Free Communities Coalition. And we, along with our tobacco-free community partnership with Diana, are very happy to be co-sponsors of today's event. We'd also like to acknowledge the help, technical support, and other provided by Health First Wisconsin in helping us to make this event possible, and also to thank our very hard-working planning committee for all the input and guidance that we received, both sometimes from a distance when folks were out of town, but then helping us organize the event. You know who you are, and we very much appreciate it. Thank you for your time and effort. For over 40 years, the Addiction Resource Council has provided help, hope, and support to those struggling in their recovery from alcohol and drug abuse, as well as their families. And this is done through a variety of prevention, community outreach, assessment, and referral services throughout Waukesha County. Waukesha County's Drug-Free Communities Coalition is a coalition of more than 100 individuals with the goal of preventing youth substance abuse. Anyone can join. And we represent a cross-section of our community: parents, youth, educators, healthcare, law enforcement, the business community, and representatives of the city, county, state, and federal governments. Together, we are Waukesha County's largest nonprofit alcohol and drug abuse prevention organization. Today's forum allows candidates to reply to questions about tobacco, alcohol, marijuana, and heroin use. And most of us in the room are very aware of the concerns our community has about these matters. There are 6 questions on these subjects that were provided in advance to the candidates, along with appropriate and relevant information regarding some of those very community concerns for their consideration. The candidates will have 2 minutes to answer each question. 1 question will be asked at a time, so everyone will have an opportunity to answer the same question. And after all 6 questions have been asked, each candidate will have approximately 1 minute to make any closing remarks that they would care to offer to the audience. We're sorry, but we won't be able to take questions from the audience this morning, given our time constraints. But we do hope that you find the forum helpful and instructive as you prepare to cast your vote during the primary election on August 12th. And be sure to vote on August 12th. So let's begin. The first question, and I think we'll be starting with Mr. Banske first, is a tobacco question. And I'll read the question. It should be appearing on the screen as well for everyone's benefit. And the question is, 86% of Wisconsinites enjoy and now expect smoke-free air. How can the state legislature ensure that Wisconsin citizens can continue to enjoy clean indoor air? Mr. Banske.
This has been a wonderful development here in our state. We've all gone out to establishments, whether with restaurants or taverns, bars, and had to deal with the morning after smoke smell, and being able to experience going out to dinner and not having that thrust upon us is certainly something that I support and would look to continue and further that. I think one of the aspects that I'm most concerned about with regard to clean air is the fact that in public buildings we have smoking that occurs within 2-3 feet, it seems, of every building that I try to go into from a commercial retail side. And I think that there needs to be some distance placed with that. I'm a non-smoker, never smoked, and I prefer not to have that type of impact upon me and my area like that. As far as any direct things that we can do as a legislature to promote or further that, I think supporting the current legislation, if challenges rise to that, is probably the best approach that I can develop at this time, to say, you know, here's something we can do to stand for what's there, make sure that we don't see a creep happening where all of a sudden e-cigarettes are okay. I think that that's something that also needs to be included, because currently we don't include e-cigarettes in that type of environment, but I'd like to see that kind of thing added to it.
First of all, thank you for having us today. And the way I feel about it, I am so grateful that for those people who went before me to get a smoke-free environment. I actually suffer from having being exposed to tobacco, that I get all stuffy. I can't breathe. And I can tell right away when that happens. And so I was on the campaign trail, and actually one thing I would like to explore when you talk about smoke-free environment is, what is it with, you know, you smoke inside your car and you have children. That was a question a constituent brought to me, and I really hadn't thought about it. So maybe they say that this happens in other states. I'm not sure about it. I'm not sure I feel about it, but the important thing is to continue to listen and to learn and understand. My father smoked all of his life until the last 2 years of his life. I, his daughter, couldn't breathe for nearly 18 years of my life because I lived in a smoke-filled environment. I was called foghorn. I couldn't breathe in school. It affected me. And then I married a non-smoker, and I learned that I could breathe. So I would support efforts to have smoke-free environments because I have personal knowledge of how it impacts you. It impacts yourself. It impacts you. And I have 30 seconds, so I'm going to pass the mic to my friend Alderman Perry.
Thank you, and thank you for putting this on this morning. It's the topics this morning are very important, and I'm glad we get the opportunity to bring more awareness to them. I support the smoking ban that we have currently. I'm in agreement as well that within a certain proximity to the buildings is where there's an impact. My mother smoked when I was a kid until I was about 10 or 11 years old, and she quit. And it was very eye-opening, even as a child, to have that perspective and that health change in one of your parents happen right in front of you like that. I never smoked. I still don't, of course. And having 2 children, almost 3 now, it's something that I'm very conscious of, even in those very individual situations where when we may be walking into a building and someone is there smoking. I think we need to bring more awareness to it from a leadership standpoint, and then bring that down to the constituents and residents as well, and that's where I think I'm well suited because I'm very connected to the community.
Good morning, everyone. Thank you so much for being here today, and I'm glad that we can discuss some of these important issues that do affect all of us in our community. As a Republican, you might imagine that there were not many things that I agreed with Governor Doyle on, but this smoking ban was one of them. As a non-smoker myself, I find it very good, as the candidate said, to be able to go into a restaurant or a public building and not have cigarette smoke all over your clothes and affecting the way that we breathe after being in that environment. And actually, like Kathy, I also have developed over the last couple of years something called esophagitis. It's a very weird thing. It's a thing that actually closes your throat a bit when you're exposed to certain things, like it could be anything from seafood, but also cigarette smoke. So just being around that environment, all of a sudden it feels like your throat is closing. It's almost like an allergic reaction. It's quite bizarre. Something that just developed for me in the last 2 years, probably, I would say. So I do take that seriously. This is obviously very much a public health issue. It's not just about a private individual right to smoke. We're not talking about banning cigarettes outright. It's about not being able to do it in a place or in an environment where it can negatively affect other people in our society. And I think that that's a very important distinction to make.
Thank you, everyone. Could you pass the mic to Ms. Cummings, please? Begin for the second question. Thank you, everyone. The second question has to do with alcohol. And the question is, Wisconsin and 3 other states allow underage drinking in a licensed establishment if the alcohol is purchased by a parent, guardian, or spouse over the age of 21. What do you think the state legislature can do to reduce underage drinking in Wisconsin? Ms. Cummings?
Thank you. I didn't know till I was reading the information that said it was still going on. Because I was in a restaurant where I said to my brother who was visiting that you can purchase it, and then the restaurant owner said, no, we don't do that. So I think there's individual restaurants that are setting their own little policies saying we don't support this. I found it also interesting is my home state of Ohio and Wisconsin are the two have this issue. No, they don't. It's another issue they have. But here's how I feel about it. Parents are to lead by example. The children look to you as their example and to lead. And if you don't lead with example by not having alcohol, if you can't not refrain from alcohol in a public place with your children, then what example are you saying? You're saying it's okay. It's okay to drink. So I would say my answer to the question is maybe it's time. We, as Waukesha County, we normally take the lead. Maybe it's time the state of Wisconsin take the lead and catch up with the other states and stop this behavior, because if you don't stop it right now with the example of not serving at the restaurants with your children, the message you are saying is okay. You're saying it's okay. So I would say get on board, Wisconsin.
Thank you. First, I'll address the statement that there's allowing underage drinking in the licensed establishment. I don't agree with that. I think that law should be changed. That would be something that I would actively pursue in the state legislature. From taking the other question, how do we reduce underage drinking in Wisconsin? I think a lot of that is done on the local level. As a member of the Common Council, I am also on the Ordinance and License Committee and have been since I've been elected. I was given a great example by Alderman Caldlinger when he was on the council in some good standards that we were setting on that committee, and I followed those. He's since left, and I've been proud to kind of take that torch and been easily, and Alderman Steve Johnson, who's endorsed me in this race, would attest to this, who chairs this committee, that I'm the strictest on that committee. And what I mean by strict is when there's people that apply for bartenders' licenses, it's putting people in the best position to serve our community in a lot of different ways, but one of those is serving alcohol. And people that have had previous issues in serving alcohol to underage people, I don't vote for them to be in that position. We work closely with law enforcement with our underage compliance checks. We recently, for the first time in 10 years, did vote to suspend a liquor license for an establishment that had issues like this. It's an issue that we take seriously as a committee and me personally as well.
I agree with Alderman Perry in the sense that I do believe that we should apply the law universally across the board, meaning that if the drinking age is 21, then it should be 21, whether it's in a bar or restaurant or wherever the case might be. I'm also in favor of harshly penalizing parents who host drinking parties for underage students. You're talking about parents that to me are very irresponsible, quite frankly, that would host a drinking party for high school students. I don't care if they want to be the cool parents or what the situation is. To me, that is not good parenting, and we should be encouraging good parenting in our communities as well. And this is a prime example of how we can do that. The third thing I think is just trying to look at our culture as a whole in this state. We obviously live in a state where we do have a drinking culture, quite frankly, and I think that it begins with education, looking at ways that we can curb the need to include alcohol in all festivities whatsoever. I'm not talking about a ban, obviously, but I am talking about education, looking at ways that we can increase pro non-alcohol related activities that are both fun and still family related as well.
Yep, we need to pass it down to Mr. Banske. Thank you.
As I look at this issue, I think we've got to understand what the intent of the original law was. And when we say that we drew a line and said that you have to be 21 to drink, we need to honor that intent and say that a parent or a sibling or relative does not have the ability to supersede the law. We don't apply that type of benchmark test to any other law except this one. I think the problem that has been in existence with overturning or moving that back to saying it's 21 no matter what has been the lobbyist groups, specifically the Wisconsin Restaurant Association and the Tavern League, because that's an issue that they want more drinkers, and not to knock them, but that's their opinion, and they commonly lobby politicians to get what they want. So as we look at this issue, it's something that wouldn't affect me from a standpoint of lobbyist groups. I don't have any issue with saying if the law says it's 21, it's 21 across the board. If you want to change the law and we want to allow people under 21 to drink, well then let's have that discussion. But if we say it's 21, it's 21 no matter what, no free pass.
Thank you, everyone. Can we please pass the mic to Mr. Perry? And Mr. Perry, we're going to ask you to answer first, please, on the second tobacco question that we have for this morning. And that is the CDC, or the Center for Disease Control, tells us that a comprehensive, adequately funded tobacco control program is the best way to reduce the burden of tobacco on our state. Since Wisconsin only invests about 10% of the recommended amount, how can the state of Wisconsin go about reducing the burden of tobacco in our state? Mr. Perry?
This was a very eye-opening question for me, considering specifically the stat of the amount that's put into it. When we look at different things to invest in government, when we see the big budget, there's always, of course, things we want to cut. But there's also things that if we invest in and we're getting a return on that investment, it's important that we continue to go down that road. I would support an increase in this because of the statistics that back it up. And I think it even digs a little deeper from a health standpoint and a healthcare cost standpoint. That were we to continue to see these types of results financially in this area, we'd also see it in the healthcare side as well, and having a healthier society here in Wisconsin. And in getting that done, really I believe it's an awareness among leaders, and again, that gets down to residents. When there's strong support from residents, it does make an impact. I've seen that on the ground level of government now. As an alderman, I learn just as much from the residents as I try to get out to them. There's certainly a virtuous cycle of education there, and I think it's very important that we connect all of that to push something like this forward.
I too was not aware of the 10% number until getting the information from you guys in the last week or two. I did also find that to be very eye-opening. To me, this is a public health issue, and as a public health issue, it should be funded. This is something that tax dollars are used for in a good way, in my opinion. This has got the potential to be of long-term benefit to not just us sitting here in this room, but also future generations and our children and grandchildren as well. So to me, when it comes to public health issues, we should be fully funding public health initiatives that have been proven to be not only cost-effective, but also work. And that's the bottom line for me, is will this program be successful in reducing our society's dependence upon tobacco? Will this program be successful in reducing our society's dependence on alcohol? And I think that in this case it is. So I would be supportive of funding this measure.
As we talk in the next session about education, that's going to be a forefront piece. One of the parts of that education discussion is going to be health and safety classes that we all took as high school students. Funding a portion of those types of coursework pieces with really the adverse impacts of tobacco use, whether it is pouches in on your gum or smoking itself, will be a critical part of any education reform that I would support. because really I get to see the other side of it. I'm watching my father die from COPD. I'm watching him not be able to walk 10 feet, to watch his granddaughter swim in a swim race without having his oxygen bottle on full open. Those are the kinds of things that a 13-year-old or a 16-year-old that starts smoking, they have no vision of really where they're headed and what they're doing. And a proper education system in the classroom that calls tobacco use for what it is, educates our children, is really a great way to address the problem into our future.
Could you repeat the question?
Certainly, I'd be happy to. The question was, the CDC, the Center for Disease Control, tells us that a comprehensive, adequately funded tobacco control program is the best way to reduce the burden of tobacco in our state. Since Wisconsin only invests about 10% of that recommended amount, how can the state of Wisconsin go about reducing the burden of tobacco in our state?
So what we have here is the CDC has recommended more dollars to go to that program, correct?
That's correct.
And if I believe that education is the key to anything. Many of the things, even in this documents that we received, I didn't know some of those statistics. Maybe I should have, but I didn't know. And so it's fair to say that other people don't know that. So we have the CDC telling us that we should educate. We have, and unless the state, meaning the legislators, are willing to commit dollars to this, how's the education going to occur? So I would be supportive of committing dollars to that education, to that educational piece, because that's where it starts. It starts with education. Many of us didn't know, so I'd be supportive of that. That's what I would do. I would support the dollars to commit to that, because if you're not going to spend it on the front end, you will pay for it on the back end. We see it in Health and Human Services at Waukesha County. We see it in drugs and alcohol and all the things that we're here to talk about today. We have drug courts, we have all those things. Wouldn't it be better to put the education on the front end than to pay for all of this on the back end through programs and stuff? If we start early and tell and share with parents through our PTAs and through our PTOs and through the elementary school, maybe we should revisit that DARE program to talk about how we can educate and fund, because that's where it starts. It starts with education, educating of the parents, educating of society, and education of the children. And that's what I would support, and unless you're going to commit dollars, you're just whistling in the wind. Thank you.
Thank you. And could we pass the mic to Mr. Travato? The next question is the second alcohol question. And the question is, to date, 38 states have sobriety checkpoints and have seen a significant decrease in drunk driving as a result. In your opinion, what are some steps that the legislature can take to reduce drunk driving in Wisconsin? Mr. Travato.
Well, I think that you already said it in your opening statement right there. Sobriety checkpoints would be something that I would certainly be willing to look into. In fact, I was at Gerke's Corners about a month or so ago during Summerfest at the OWI Task Force to support the local law enforcement community as they began to set that program up for that holiday weekend right before the 4th of July. Sobriety checkpoints need to be done, I think, in a way where it is you need to ensure that you're not stopping drivers that are not doing anything wrong. I do want to be clear about that. But at the same time, sobriety checkpoints have proven that they've worked in these 38 states that have implemented this program, and I think that Wisconsin, as a state, should at least be looking into sobriety checkpoints.
Sobriety checkpoints are certainly a worthy conversation to have. Obviously, you'll have people who will be quite sensitive to the issue of being stopped without an offense. The Supreme Court has ruled that this is a legally allowed process, that is not illegal search, which really brings an interesting dynamic, because that would be most people's first argument against sobriety checkpoints is the illegal search aspect, but with the Supreme Court ruling that negates that. So it's a valid discussion to have, to understand the upfront costs are significant, and the back-end benefits, to understand where that piece is going to fall through. Our OWI task force have proved to be extremely successful, and they focus on those holiday issues and certainly Summerfest issues. There are advantages, and I think we can take some of those successes that we've had in the state and apply them in a bit bigger, broader aspect without offending the driver who's not driving impaired or doing things other than that. This also has, statistically, they show that the sobriety checkpoints not only help with the drinking and driving, but they also find a lot of weapons charges and things like that when they do those inspections. So there's some benefits outside of just addressing the OWI, and I think that those things need to be explored, and a conversation needs to be had about them here in Wisconsin.
Thank you. 38 states have 38 states have checkpoints, which you supported. In light of the Supreme Court saying that it's okay to do, that it doesn't infringe on your rights, 38 states have done it, and the fact that I've talked to a law enforcement person to say, okay, would there be unintended consequences of this? I don't see an unintended consequence. I think a positive unintended consequence is we bring awareness, we bring education, and other states have proven that this actually works. So I would be supportive of the checkpoints. Also, when this is done, I am told by the officers that there is a community, there's notification that we're going to be doing this. And so it goes back, strictly back to education. And I've been educated by all of you to find out that 38 states already do it, and maybe Wisconsin should get on that road and do it also. Thank you.
I was very happy to see this question on here. A little surreal for me, for years and years, listened to the radio. Certain talk show hosts would bring up this subject. A lot of people would call in, and what subjects where I normally very much agree with them, I very much didn't in this case. My home state is Missouri. They've had this there for years, and it works. This is something I absolutely support. Sobriety checkpoints work. The drinking culture and the drunk driving culture in this state is out of control. I mean, raise your hand if you know someone who's been in a drunk driving accident or been killed by someone in a drunk driver. Over half the people in the room. That's absolutely crazy. Other states have had this particular law that we know works for years and years and years, yet ourselves, with the drunk driving statistics that we have, we still won't make it more of a deterrent for people to do it. That's something that we need out of the next assemblyman here, to be more bold in Madison and take this issue very, very seriously.
Thank you. If you can pass the mic back to Mr. Banske. And we'll ask the first marijuana question, please. And the question reads, law enforcement and other sources have identified marijuana to be a significant problem in Waukesha County. In your opinion, what legislative steps would you recommend to reduce marijuana abuse in Waukesha? Mr. Banske.
When it comes to drug use and legislation, one of the things that I think we're lacking, and this will tag into the heroin question as well, so I'll try to avoid that, is actually the punishment aspect of it. And people commonly link this to a war on drugs and say that punishment does not diminish the sale and delivery. I think we need to focus on what we're doing from a crime and punishment aspect on these. We already have a number of programs that are out there that are funded to, educate, to counsel and work there. I think Waukesha County has really been a powerful leader with regard to requiring DUI offenders and drug users to go through an extremely comprehensive program. If you're not familiar with it, it should scare anybody from using drugs. I mean, it's comprehensive and really drives people to get help and requires that process. I think that that's something that can be promoted and exported out of Waukesha County into other communities that would help increase the pain for somebody who has decided to go down that path, and maybe create that hurdle or that aversion to taking the risk to take a bite of the apple, if you will, in that way.
Well, we'll know pretty soon with the legalization of marijuana in another state how well that's worked. And the reason I say that is because I had someone ask me the other day, would you support the legalization of marijuana? And I said, no. I said, we'll have statistics real soon with the states to our west as to whether or not what happens to that state. And marijuana and alcohol leads to other more debilitating drugs. We know that. We know that we pay for it on the back end. We know that it affects their minds. A brain is not developed until the age of 25. And yet, we're talking about legalizing it. It's hitting children between the ages of 12 and 17. This is not something we want. I was not one of the flower children. I'm not that old. And it's just, we shouldn't do it. And as candidate Banske has said, Waukesha County has taken the lead with our drug courts, with our alcohol courts, with our trying to do the fast track and for interventions. And so no, I would not support it. It would be really easier if this question was right there in front of me. So I would not support it.
The question here to reduce marijuana abuse, first, is not continuing to let it move forward. I would also not support legalizing the recreational use of marijuana. In some medical cases, I think we're to the point to where we're there to have that discussion, but not there yet to completely legalize it. On the other hand, I've also spent some time with law enforcement doing ride-alongs and speaking with them specifically about the root of some of the problems and the calls that they get. More often than not, it's alcohol, and when it's not alcohol, it's usually drugs. And marijuana, as we all know, it's been proven it's a gateway drug, even to the drug that we'll speak about next. Deterrence has to be a part of the solution as well. It has to be followed through on the prosecution end, and resources need to be there for our law enforcement to make sure that they can arrest people that they need to.
As all of you might imagine, while campaigning, we've probably all been knocking on a lot of doors to ask voters for their support. And one of the doors that I knocked on last week was Officer Bill Beglinger, who was my DARE officer back at Lowell Elementary School here in Waukesha. And it reminded me of the fact that DARE works. And I think that DARE should be a program that we should look into funding again. I personally have never used marijuana, which I think is pretty rare for people of my generation. And I think that we need to be looking at those, at DARE as an option again. And I think that one of the reasons why I never did that was because of DARE. And I told Officer Beglinger that, and he had a big smile on his face and said, thank you for sharing that with me. That reaffirms the fact that this program does work in a way, at least. So for me, that program worked, and I think for others as well. I do think that there is some real benefits to having education early in our school system about the dangers of marijuana, about the fact that it is a gateway drug and can lead to other things, such as heroin, such as other drugs across the board, and I think it's something that we need to be taking seriously and looking at funding again. The other thing that I think that was discussed briefly here from the other candidates is looking at Colorado with their legalization of recreational use of marijuana. I know that we're only, 7 months into their legalization program, but I think that you've already seen a number of ill effects from the legalization that has taken place in that state. Number one, because I don't think that there have been real studies that have been done to show the effects of marijuana. The federal government has not fully studied the effects as they've done with tobacco or alcohol or other drugs necessarily. So I think that we need to be very, very careful about the legalization debate here in Wisconsin. It probably will be an issue in the state legislature, probably starting with medical marijuana, but I would be opposed to the legalization of marijuana.
And our question on heroin. Heroin addiction and overdose deaths continue to plague Waukesha County. In your opinion, what are some additional legislative steps you would recommend to reduce heroin addiction and overdose deaths in Wisconsin and Waukesha specifically, please? Ms. Cummings?
Reduce heroin deaths? Well, we've, on the county board just recently, we've authorized our sheriff's department to give the drug to counteract the heroin overdose. That's something I found out that I supported because it's kind of like, if you think about it, CPR. They're the first responders, and up until recently, our own officers weren't able to administer that and counteract the effects of heroin. It is horrible. I mean, I am told that it is affecting more and more people, and it's pure. It's purer than it ever was. And things that we should do, we got to get the parents on board. I mean, the parents have no idea. The kids already know it. Maybe it's setting up workshops. Maybe it's reaching out to the PTAs and PTOs to say that this is happening, because really when they get to be teenagers, it's too late. It really is too late. The education of the parents is absolutely critical. And so I would support, I think your question was, what would I do in the assembly to promote? It goes back to the educational piece. And if you don't provide the education, you have to provide the dollars so the education can occur. So what I would do is continue what we're already doing, early intervention, and I think it's called the Narcan, is it? Narcan drug? That really is going to save lives, because they've brought people from the brink of death, and that's what we need to do. And I'll pass the phone, pass the mic.
Like I mentioned before, I've done ride-alongs with law enforcement in the city of Waukesha. The very first time I did that, the first question I asked was about heroin. It was a very hot topic at the time, and it's continued to be, unfortunately. And I was floored by the answer that I got, that they told me, Waukesha West is in my aldermanic district, that heroin was cheaper and easier to get than beer. I asked the same question this year when I did a ride-along about 7 weeks ago, and they said the exact same thing. So, which tells us we have a ways to go yet, and that's scary. You know, as a parent, with kids who are going to start school, you know, soon here, but that's something that it takes a long time to get a hold of, and having that be the same answer 2 years in a row it scared me very much. I agree that this comes down to awareness and parenting. When we talk about local control of issues, one, I believe we need to empower our local law enforcement, because they're the ones fighting this war on a daily basis. And it is a war. With something that easily accessible and that cheap than just beer, which we've talked about today as being a major issue as well, it's absolutely a war. And I work with someone who, and I'm okay to use her example because she's chosen to share her story publicly. A woman named Jody, who I work with every day at the Journal-Sentinel. She lost her daughter in a convo walk just a couple months ago. And her feedback was, we need to also enable the parents with the options that are out there, every single option in regards to treatment to save their own children. If we don't enable the parents on the ground level, if we wait till it gets to law enforcement, we have that battle, and that's why we have that same answer 2 years in a row.
Preventing heroin abuse is an issue that I feel very, very passionate about, and I believe that after being elected as your next state representative, this should be an issue that we are absolutely focused on here in Waukesha County. We have got an absolute pandemic going on here, in my opinion. I either have the strength or the weakness of being the youngest candidate in this race. I graduated from Waukesha West High School in 2000, and heroin had not really hit the high school yet at that point, but it was starting to come into that age demographic. And I personally know 5 people that I went to high school with or knew that have died from heroin use. And it's absolutely affecting people of my age demographic and younger in a very, very hard way. And I think the Waukesha needs to be, our next legislator should absolutely be on the front lines of this battle. I support what Representative Nygren in the bill that he passed in the last legislative session. I've read that bill very closely, and I think that it's a good start. I also support Brad Schimmel's plan in his race for Attorney General. He's put forth a very detailed, comprehensive plan to combat heroin abuse. My campaign has been very vocal about supporting those efforts. We have it on our website. We've talked about it as an issue. I raise that issue when I talk to people on the doors because it's affecting people all over the 97th Assembly District.
Heroin use is something that I've been very strong on, and when you say that we need to educate the parents, and Vince mentions John Nygren. John Nygren almost lost his daughter to a heroin overdose, and he stated he had no idea that his daughter had gotten hooked on that stuff. The problem is that parents don't know, and it's not all about education. The HOPE laws that were signed in April do a great justice to providing education, to providing first responders with the ability to administer Narcan. And we have approached that fight from education and from counseling and help for users. What we've not done is decided to, as a society, take a stand against heroin, against the dealers. Currently, if you sell heroin, you're facing, based on your amount, a Class H felony, which carries a maximum of 12 years. However, if I catch a child pornography picture on your computer, you can face 25 years. I would ask which one is worse. Both, I think, are abhorrent. Why wouldn't we as a society say that we are done with this drug, with this problem, and increase this to a minimum of a Class D felony? I would actually support going to a 25-year minimum jail sentence. And if you sell that crap to my kid or your kid, it's a 40-year prison sentence. If you want to end heroin, you need to tell the dealers in Milwaukee the goof's coming out of Chicago, not in Wisconsin. And if you do it here, we're going to lock you up and we're going to throw away the key, just like we need to say. So my presentation, I've talked to Dan Nietzsche, a district attorney from Walworth County, and I've talked to a former warden at Waupun about this presentation. At a minimum, there is support to move this to a Class D felony. I get it, there's a little bit of apprehension when you start talking about minimum prison terms instead of these maximums, but this is something we cannot allow to continue.
Thank you. I'm going to ask if we can, since our panel has been very succinct with all of their answers, we have some extra time. And with their permission, we have just a couple of other questions we might ask, if that would be all right with all of you. The question I'd like to ask, will you pass this to Mr. Perry, please? Will Mr. Perry answer first on this one? Thank you for your patience in passing the mic. You're getting really good at that. It is a tobacco question. And audience, please be aware that our candidates may need to gather their thoughts for a moment before responding. They may not have had an opportunity to think about this, so we do want to give them that courtesy. So the question, Mr. Perry, is, knowing that no tobacco product is a safe tobacco product, in your opinion, what are the steps we should take to ensure our kids don't have access to or are not attracted to these dangerous other tobacco products, such as candy-flavored cigars and those types of products?
Sure.
Mr. Perry?
The steps we take, I'm very ground level on this. My children are 1 and 2, and again, I have a girl coming in September. And so it's very much put on me in that I need to educate them on what's good and what's bad out there. Very eye-opening to see the plates of candy back there. That there's a lot of information even here today that I need to go back and share with my constituents. And as an assemblyman, that's something that as a future assemblyman, that's something that I see as scalable. The connection I've had with residents as an alderman can be done as assemblyman, and information like that with so many families in this district is very critical, because the perception I have is that there's a lot of these types of issues kind of falling through the cracks and getting into the hands of children and the parents not knowing about it. So an education standpoint, it's really starting with the families, and starting in my own home for that matter, is very important.
Thank you.
It does start with the families, and it does start with education. I think that could probably be the answer for all of these different issues, is that it does start with education. It also has to do with truth in marketing. When you look at that display in the back, that is very eye-opening. It's very revealing. I've had the opportunity in my life to spend some time overseas working, and I can tell you that in other countries, you will you'll go into a convenience store like our gas stations, and there will be cigarettes there, but with big skull and crossbones right on the outside of the cigarette package, because that's what's mandated by their laws. They put those images right on the side of a package of cigarettes. They put the image right on the side of whatever products it might be. I think the truth in advertising is an important and noble goal that we should be aiming for in our society as well.
One of the challenges that we have is we see bigger parent companies that have an interest in selling tobacco starting to produce products on a lower end company that mimic their tobacco products, kind of as a training ground, if you will. A grape cigar is on the back table, gets a child of thinking that that is an interesting and cool thing, and as they age up, they're imprinted that that is something that is an exciting and glorified piece. We should be talking in Wisconsin about banning those types of similar products that mimic products that we know to be bad for our health. Candy cigars, I mean, I get it, I had the candy cigarettes too, and I remember as a kid, right, I was mimicking my father. My father was a smoker, and that's exactly what I was doing. Those things taste awful. It was really that cool factor of mimicking my parent. So we can control that, and we can say, again, not in our state, we're not going to allow you to sell products that mimic products that we know to be dangerous to our health, and that's something we should be exploring.
Question?
Certainly. Question was, knowing that no tobacco product is a safe tobacco product, in your opinion, what are the steps we should take to ensure our kids don't have access to or are not attracted to these dangerous other tobacco products, such as candy-flavored cigars or products of that sort?
I actually think that candidate Banske is on the right track here. We shouldn't have things that are similar. We've done that. It's kind of like when we grew up, you had toy guns, right? And they were similar to the real ones, but now they put a red tip on it, so they're no longer, they try to make them look different. And we say it's not okay. I bring that up only because of the fact that when things look and children see their adults use them, we're actually sending a message that it's okay. So I'd be for either putting them behind the shelf or eliminating them or those type of things, because when they become fun or they become tasty, it's just a way of getting you to use it. It was a way to get, in the old days, when you saw the movie stars smoke the cigarette, it was socially acceptable. It was a way to get you to use it. When we saw the camel guy on the horse, it was a way to get you to use it. This is no different. Having a candy flavor, having the glitzy packaging, it's a way of marketing to getting you to use it. We just have to stop it. Skulls and crossbones is a good idea. You know, if it doesn't look good, it sends a message, it's not good for you. And when I talk about education with the parents, there was one education piece that I took as a young parent. It was called Parent to Parent. It was parents that helped other parents be strong, and we stood with each other. Now that is a program that, to me, that worked, that we need to bring back and get it back in the school system, because that was long done, long past. And we need to get that back into the school system, and if that, we're going to do it, as a state assembly person, I should find the dollars to fund it. Thank you.
Thank you, panel. We have a lot of extra time, but what I'm going to suggest, if we may, in respect to candidates and their preparation, is to allow them a little extra time for closing remarks, if we can. And I would suggest probably 3 minutes or so. What I would ask, if you could please, to consider in your comments as you close this evening is remarks you'd like to make to constituents in the audience, is to think about any other prevention thoughts, ideas you would have as a legislator on behalf of our county and Wisconsin in general that would involve tobacco, cessation of tobacco, and or alcohol or other drug abuse. So please take your time, gather your thoughts, and we'll allow about 2 or 3 minutes to do that. Again, we have plenty of time, so we thank the panel and thank you for your time. Audience, thank you for your participation in being here. And I'll let whoever is most comfortable and would like to begin first to please feel free. It's my voice, it's not you, Ms. Cummings. I have that problem regularly.
I'll start first, and I'll give everybody their the extra time then. When I decided to run for this office, it was largely based on the fact that I feel that the voices of families in our community need to be represented. I am not a candidate that is seeking endorsements from political characters, this guy, that gal. I'm not somebody who asked for the Realtors Association or the Mortgage Bankers Association, for which I'm a member, to donate or run radio ads for me. I want to be a voice for our constituents, for our families. And it was things like seeing a grandmother walk into my church who had just had her son arrested the night before for heroin use that got me excited. And saying, you know, I've seen enough of this. It's time for somebody to take a stand and make a voice heard. So my campaign is centered around really focusing on issues that face our families. It was what got me the Wisconsin Family Association Action Pack, their endorsement. Prior to yesterday, I was the only one. Brandon Rosner has also gotten their endorsement. It's a very difficult endorsement to achieve because their focus is on all of the family aspects in the state. So when I look at, again, the reasons I want to be this assembly person and serve the community is because I'm part of the community through the work that I do, through the volunteer actions that I do through Fox River Church, and I see these things as very real issues that are tearing apart our families. They're shredding them. I've seen mothers go to jail with a 4-month-old and a 6-year-old. These are things, you know, she stole $500,000 from her parents in a coin collection. I mean, these are life-altering for an entire family outside of just her own immediate family that impact that. We need to address these issues head on, and I think I'm best suited to do that because it's not sterile for me. It's in my passion. It's in my heart. I've seen what this does, and every time I was telling Joe before we started, every time I think about this heroin use, I think about the little boy named Taylor, who's 6 years old, whose grandma walked into that gym and said that, you know, his dad has this issue, and she didn't know where to go. It became personal, and it becomes personal. I see you've got a picture on, I mean, and when Alderman Perry asked you to raise your hands, I'm not surprised that your hands went up. When it's personal, it's passionate, and that's what this is for me. This is not a job. I own my own business. This is a passion. This is personal for me, and I've stated that way back in my original campaign announcement. This is personal for me.
Thank you, Mr. Banske. Anyone else?
Closing.
Yes.
What I've learned in life is that things are not always black and white. There are shades of gray. What I've learned in my life is that locking up people is not the answer. What I've learned in my life, that education is. That is the key. That is the base, the core Parents don't know this is going on, so they need to be educated, parent to parent. As an elected official in Waukesha County, I didn't know how bad it was until I go to committees and I listen to what's going on. And we have fast track. We tried to curb the alcohol issues in Waukesha County. So we have trouble with alcohol in Waukesha County, and we're fast approaching the heroin problem. But it is about, the reason I got into the race was to serve the residents of the 97th district. This is one piece of it, but what I've learned is that you need to understand that locking up people is not the answer, that educating them is, to getting them into a program is, to getting them into fast track is an answer, is to get them into the drug and alcohol treatment program is part of the answer. There are many pieces, and not every program fits all people, but you have to start somewhere. And you start you start as a parent at home, telling them that, you know, you don't drink, you don't smoke, you don't do this. You're their examples to the children. Then as you move into school, the only thing you have is who are their friends. Be a parent. Don't be a friend to your kids. Be a parent to your kids. And then as we have these issues that come for us both at Waukesha County and as a society, give people the tools to fight this. Part of it is education. Part of it's going to be on the front lines with the Narcon, with the police office, with the sheriff's department. But if I am privileged enough to be your assemblyman, I will work for you, I will fight for you, and I will work to make a difference. I asked for your vote on August the 12th, but I am reminded that my first cousin, who was 6 months younger than me, was an alcoholic, fell into a pool, had brain damage, and is now dead. We don't have to look far to see where it's affected us. We probably can look at each and every one of you out there to know that it's affected somebody. If it's not a first cousin, it's a member of your family, it's a good friend. This is not going away. We just need to keep the fight and keep it on the front burner, not the back burner. Thank you.
Thank you, and thank you all for being here today. Thank you for putting this on. I think the awareness of this is incredibly important. But thank you for so many voters for coming out. This is obviously an important issue to you. There's a lot of research to be done on who to vote for. Personally, I think it's telling that the two most well-funded candidates in this race made the choice not to be here today. There was some talk last night at a forum about grassroots campaigns, and there certainly are 6 good candidates in this race. But this issue is important, and the other issues are important as well, and I encourage you to do that research and not vote off just the latest radio ad that you hear that we've already referenced today. These issues, as well as the other ones that you'll look at, I believe are very locally focused. That's where our solutions come from. That's where my experience is at. I moved to Waukesha in 2009 with my wife. We moved from Brookfield. We chose Waukesha specifically where we were going to buy a house and start a family, and we've done that. I've gotten more and more involved in the community when I was elected alderman in 2013. Earning the trust of the voters is one of the most nervous experiences of my life, but also one of the most ones I'm most proud of. So solving these issues locally is very important, and it's something that how I view it is that we do it together. So I really encourage you to do the research on the candidates. My website is perryforassembly.com. Please visit and contact me if you have any questions. Thanks for being here.
To echo the first part of what Aaron said, I would also like to thank all of you for being here this morning. I think it's very important that we all stay not only informed but engaged in these issues that affect our community so much. You being here this morning is a great step in that direction. I hope that you can take whatever you learned this morning and talk to your friends, talk to your neighbors, and make sure that we begin that process of education, which I think is so vitally important for the health and the well-being and the success of eradicating the plague of drugs and alcohol from our communities. I got into this race for several reasons. The first reason is because I love this community. I'm a third-generation Waukesha resident. I love this community very deeply, and I care passionately about the people that live in this district. From a political perspective, my main focal point will be to spend your tax dollars wisely. When we're talking about these issues, though, I think that, to me, this is a public health issue, just like cancer, just like any other disease, meaning that there are public dollars that should be used to go into prevention, to go into rehabilitation. When we look at the costs of these programs, when we look at the costs of drug courts, when we look at the costs of rehab, when we look at the costs that crime that is caused by drugs and alcohol costs to our community, it would be fiscally conservative to say that we should be spending money to prevent these things from happening in the first place, rather than for paying for them after they've already occurred. To me, as a fiscal conservative, this is also very much in line with my thinking. We need to be spending our dollars cost effectively, and this is one of the examples of how we can do so. I'd like to ask all of you directly for your votes here today, since this is a political forum and we are less than 2 weeks from an election. You can feel free to talk to me one-on-one after this forum. I'd be happy to answer any other questions for you. My website is travatofораssembly.com. And again, I ask for your votes on August 12th. Thank you very much for being here today.
Thank you, everyone. Thank you, Mr. Banske, Ms. Cummings, Mr. Travato, and Mr. Perry. Really appreciate your time and your thoughtful responses to all of our questions. And we hope that perhaps everyone would stay behind a bit, if you wouldn't mind, and perhaps have a chance to visit with some of the audience members. I know there's some personal things that they may want to share with you, and that might be of use to you, and we hope that you'll be able to have the time. Thank you, audience. We have also in the packets that you have a survey. And we would ask you, please, if you could take a couple of minutes before you do leave the room, if you wouldn't mind giving us your comments about today's event. That's helpful to us in our data keeping, so we appreciate your thoughts and very frank comments. And if you could leave them as you exit the room, there's a basket near the door. Please feel free to do that. We're scheduled to be in the room until 9:30. So again, if our candidates are able to allow a little bit of their personal time, I know they're very busy, and we appreciate them taking the extra time this morning. Please spend some time with them if you can. Again, thanks for coming and spending your morning with us. We hope again that the forum has been helpful and instructive, that you have a better sense of the candidates and their positions on these matters, their opinions on these matters. They're of great importance to us, and as I believe Candidate Travato had said, as well as I think all three in your own way, this really is a community issue. Every one of these items that we've discussed this morning are absolutely essential to the health and well-being of our community, and it really is a community initiative, and it really does truly take a village, and we're the village. There's no one else to do this work to help protect our kids, to save our families, and to have a healthier, happier Wisconsin, and particularly Waukesha, and the 97th district for certain. And we have a good selection of folks who are very committed to this, as we are. It's good to know that. So please do vote on the 12th of August. Don't forget. Take time to consider your choice carefully, and do spend some time with the candidates this morning if you have time. Again, many thanks for your time and effort, and we appreciate you being here. Have a good morning, and take good care. Thanks.